Yeah, so the secondary haul, yes, is really been tremendous. The running back situation obviously can't help what we're looking at in 2020. We can get back to recruiting, but I also wanted to serve up the name that would help for 2020, possibly depending on the transfer. Oklahoma's Trey Sermon. I've not called up his stats, but from watching the games and knowing his name and knowing that he's been a main contributor there at Oklahoma, as soon as he entered the transfer portal, just because of his elite level play or near elite level play. I don't want to give him too much cred there, but he's a very, very good player. And then looking at Ohio State's need there, and again, need relative to expectations. There's not a need in regards to will they have serviceable, very beyond that, good players at the position of running back? Yes, even without Trey Sermon. But when a guy like this becomes available and Ohio State's wanting to get back to the playoffs, that's a noticeable name out there.
Yeah, he's he is a very solid back. He's not going to be the guy that's going to run away from you. He's not a 4-4 guy. He's more of a power back. He's coming off of his own knee injury. He got hurt during the Iowa State game after very early in that game. His best season was 2018, where he rushed for near about 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns in that season. He certainly is going to be a guy, if he ends up at Ohio State, that will be right there, right off the mix. Probably a 15 carry type of back. You're going to have Marcus Crowley and hopefully Master Teague all coming off of their injuries too. So, Ohio State's going to have a lot of potential, but, I think the trainers are going to be extremely busy once they're allowed to get back and do their work and we return to some level of normalcy at this point. There's some debate whether or not Sermon is going to need to take that visit to Ohio State before he makes a decision, or if something could come sooner. I'm of the mindset that something could come sooner. I'm not saying that we're going to see something happening in the next day or two, but I don't think we're going to see this drag out too long.
Trey Sermon,
yeah, I would
Buckeye
say.
fans. Sure, Steve. I just wanted to set you up here real quick because Buckeye fans might remember that Trey Sermon caught a touchdown in Columbus in the game that the Sooners won. Baker Mayfield, etc. 3 catches, 23 yards in that game, ran for 62 on 17 carries. Steve.
Yeah, he's familiar with the end zone at Ohio Stadium and familiar with winning at Ohio Stadium. So that's those are good things. If he never loses a game at Ohio Stadium as a college player, and he plays at least a year at Ohio State, then I think everybody will be pretty happy about that. But he is a guy, I think he's rushed for about 2,000 yards in his career at Oklahoma. Really came in and did some big things as a freshman. Kind of got passed by, I think, this past year, and then had the injury situation late in the year. And I just think that he looks at the guys who have been in front of him there at Oklahoma and has decided that maybe the grass is greener somewhere else and will get more of an opportunity. And I think the situation at Ohio State is wide open. You're talking about Master Teague with whatever it is, the Achilles, and he may not be back full go till October potentially. Maybe back able to train in September and then play in October potentially, something like that. Steel Chambers, Marcus Crowley dealing with his own injury. So it's very much injury-shortened group. You can always put Demario McCall back there. You'll have Mayan Williams arriving as a freshman in the fall, but it's hard for a freshman to make a tremendous impact right away, although J.K. Dobbins certainly did. So it's interesting. I think Sermon, it brings probably an understanding of what the expectation is to play at a high level, to play in a major conference, the demands of playing the running back position and everything else. If his knee checks out, and typically the ACL is not always a full year. I mean, he could be back in 7 or 8 months perhaps, and maybe he'll be back ready to go time for the start of the season camp. So I guess we'll have to wait and see on that.
I wonder, with players now being banished from the facilities and getting home remedies on how to rehab, like, can you even, if things were normal, we could maybe expect Master Teague to be ready by the end of camp. Now, I think, how long are things pushed back in terms of rehab? Like, is the rehab situation for Master Teague pushed back an extra month because he's not getting full-time rehab from Adam Stewart and the guys at Ohio State, and we know how good they are at getting guys ready. That's not happening now. So maybe the timelines on all of the injured guys need to be pushed back a little. I think Marcus Crowley should be fine because of when he was injured. But you look at the running back room, and Teague has an injury. Marcus Crowley's been injured. Trey Sermon has a history of injuries. I think even back maybe in high school had some issues. So I guess, you bring as many guys as you can, and you hope 2 or 3 of them stay healthy for the season. But, Trey Sermon, I think over 2,000 yards rushing in his career, so you wouldn't turn that down. I don't think he comes in and is automatically the Ohio State starter. I think I don't know who that is. We didn't get to see much of anything this spring. All we would have seen this spring is that Steel Chambers is pretty good, and we won't really know anything until the fall. And what will we know then if Master Teague isn't good to go? I think we all here really like Marcus Crowley based on what we've seen. Trey Sermon has been a complimentary back his entire career. Can he become more? It'd be another storyline to follow, and we can always use those during camp.
My guess is they've got some kind of plan in place. They have their own sports medicine clinic now, kind of a standalone area. And my guess is people are still being seen on an outpatient basis as needed. I can't imagine that they've pulled the plug on medical treatment for these people, even though campus is by and large closed. I mean, the hospital is still open. So either at that sports medicine clinic or another facility, I'm sure that they're still getting whatever the normal rehab would be.
Gene Smith,
because some of the out-of-state guys may have gone home at this point.
Yeah.
If a year 1 or year 2 person where the expectation is that you have to live in campus housing, and they've closed all of that, and you sit there, and Steel Chambers is from Georgia, Marcus Crowley's from Florida. So, it would be great, and I'm sure that there are going to be certain situations where guys have moved in with other guys to be able to make certain things work out or whatnot. But not everybody's going to be in a situation to where they're going to be able to go down to Ackerman and go to that facility.
Yeah, and Gene Smith mentioned that there would be protocols and things of that nature. Didn't go into what they would be, but it won't be ideal. And so maybe we need to just keep that in mind as camp, if camp finally gets underway. And I also would expect probably more injuries this season in college football overall, and maybe in sports overall, with just the lack of being able to do all of the necessary prescribed exercises and just staying in peak shape. I do wonder if, when Ohio State signs players, if they don't enroll early, they want them sending in videotapes of their workouts. I wonder if that is just the norm right now for all of the players to send in, this is what we want you to do. Send us some proof that you're doing it. And maybe in that way they can hit the ground, at least jogging, maybe not running in late summer, but hit the ground jogging.
I had somebody ask me last. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think based on the timing of this, if they get an all clear, it's March 20th. If they get an all clear on May 20th, it wouldn't surprise me if the NCAA allows colleges to have, say, 10 practice sessions in June, and they're able to do installation at that time, because that's what spring is all about, is installation and that type of stuff. And I would think that there'd be some kind of a dispensation from the NCAA, because college coaches are going to squawk to the NCAA that no way we can get this together in the preseason, the way that it should be. So my guess is we'll see some kind of truncated spring if, and again, big if, we get an all clear within the next 2 months. Maybe they can squeeze in a few practices in June, and that'll be how it goes.
Or even maybe also opening fall camp a little early too. I don't know if you want to put 15 practices or 13 practices on the front end of fall camp or whatnot. But with that being said, there is going to be the necessity to be able to knock off the ring rust and get these guys right, or we are going to be dealing with a lot of knees and ankles and shoulders and whatnot. And, that's going to just create its own set of issues.
What if we can get a preseason scrimmage against another team? The basketball does that. They do their closed scrimmages. Ohio State has done that with Louisville. Maybe this is a year where there's special dispensations for everything. Maybe if you have an elongated fall camp, you don't want to just beat up on each other for, 8 weeks, 7 weeks, 6 weeks. Maybe bring in Georgia.
Right.
Because are the most superstitious lots on the face of the earth. I don't know if they'd want to do anything to where there potentially could be any tape or anything about their team premature.
They don't even let the media
in.
Yeah. They don't let the media in. There's no way they're going to let the other enemy in.
No.
Well, and you have the risk of injury too with football. I don't think it's quite as bad in basketball. You're at the mercy of the opponent. There's kind of a tacit agreement that I'm not going to injure you if you don't injure me type thing. And, you don't want to kind of put yourself at that liberty, I suppose. So I don't know if playing another major college in the preseason is going to work. I mean, heck, we'll see. We're in an interesting time. I think there's going to be some interesting things that come out of this that will lead to changes. It's hard to say what it'll be, but I think we're going to look back on this and say, oh yeah, before the pandemic, it was done this way, and now it's done that way. And there's going to be some interesting things that come out of it, maybe some better practices that will come out of this.
We had a call-in show last night, and somebody asked me, hey, without spring football, how in the world are these teams going to be able to prepare for a football season in September? And my thought was, well, first of all, they're all in the same boat, so nobody has an inherent advantage. Now, of course, there are advantages for certain teams and certain programs because of the coaching stability and the coaching staff versus a first-year head coach at like a Florida State with Mike Norvell. Well, it's going to be more difficult for him having not built those relationships with the players and the coaching, the assistants, not building the relationship, the terminology, the whole deal, the culture, and the structure of the deal. But that goes with the territory. But in regards to advantages, disadvantages, everybody is in the same boat. And I went back to, and you guys have all heard from this gentleman many more times than I have, but I went back to 3 different times I was able to hear from Jim Delaney at a luncheon. And he talked about, and as you guys know, he was always fighting the monster and trying to create some kind of balance between big-time athletics and letting these kids be students, and trying to find that balance and trying to fight the uphill battle of stemming the curve of just this being a full-time job all year, which it's basically become, except for a few respites. It's a full-time job for these kids. And he was hearkening back to when he was a varsity athlete at the University of North Carolina. So we're talking North Carolina basketball. We're talking big time, going to a Final Four while he was there, just talking about the differences in what's expected of these athletes versus what was expected of him and the athletes of that day. And maybe we would just find a little bit more balance for this particular football season in regards to what is expected of these kids and how much time they devote to it. And everyone, again, would be in the same boat if there's a reasonable time at which they're able to get back to it here in the next couple months.
Something I wanted to kind of throw out that, similar but dovetailing a little bit as well is, without having the spring practice period, let's remember Ohio State's over 85 scholarships once the regular summer enrollees get here. And normally spring would be an opportunity to be able to go through and sit there and have the conversations after spring and say, look, John Doe, we love you, but you're probably not going to have much of an opportunity here. So, if they don't end up having that period, they're going to have to make some decisions. I mean, they do have a potential gray shirt candidate and Jake Seibert in the special teams. But, if you, lo and behold, bring in Trey Sermon, you, lo and behold, decide that maybe you bring in a grad transfer corner because you're concerned about depth or whatever. These are going to create positions of where you're going to have to be able to go through roster management and shed players before the start of fall camp when you have to be at that 85.